Okay, it is 3:53 p.m. We have come out of executive session and no actions were taken in executive session. So the next item on the agenda is to discuss the expenditure of remaining ARPA funds. So we will hopefully very soon, which I'll talk about later in the agenda, be getting to the end of our obligations under our construction grant. So the remainder of those funds, as well as the remainder of what's left that was contributed directly by towns and the town ARPA match, which is actually technically part of the same construction grant. The remainder of those funds we need to spend by the end of the year, or this is my understanding. We will just double and triple check to make sure this understanding is the correct understanding. But my understanding is that we need to spend those by the end of the year. So the analysis I'm going to be doing is taking a look at the presuming. Adam, you unmuted yourself. Do you have a feedback?
I did. You're right, Chat, or at least ChatGPT agrees with you.
Oh, well,
So
if ChatGPT agrees with me, then I must be right. Okay, well, we'll
you
take
must
that
be
one.
right.
I'd like to object to using AI for anything, but we'll talk about that another time.
You could Google it. Google is less server intensive.
Thanks.
Still somewhat server intensive.
Yeah.
Anyway, so where was I? So we have to spend the rest of the ARPA money this year. And so the first thing I need to do is figure out how much that is exactly, because we still have some more money that we need to spend under the construction grant. So I can estimate that to the best of my knowledge. We have more money we need to spend on Old Town Road, which I can estimate to the best of my ability. And then we also have there's always a lag between when services are rendered and when you actually get invoiced. So I need to do the homework to refine the estimate of how much money we actually have left. And then the second thing I need to do, and this is again presuming we still unfortunately do not have clarity on BEAD from the federal government, although I remain hopeful that will be resolved in the way that we want before all of my hairs are gray, or before we run out of money for the ARPA. But I'm presuming that we have a BEAD world, and then so the analysis I'm going to do is assuming that we get BEAD, having a look at the rest of the district and seeing where there's existing fiber, where there's existing cable, what we know about where our competitors plan to build, and having a look at potential uses of those remaining ARPA funds, which could look something like similar to what we did in Virgins back in the day, where we did aerial extensions that were not allowable under the ARPA construction grant. We paid for those with town ARPA with the idea of being able to pick up, the density and the cost per passing is low, that building those areas would be good for our take rate. And I think in general that's been true. I can dig a little bit more to see to the degree to which that's been true, but we can do something very similar in Middlebury, knowing what we know about Middlebury and the people living in Middlebury, and the average incomes in and around Middlebury. Could be a good business case. And then we also have there's areas that right now don't have fiber from us or anyone, but that do have cable. And so those areas are not eligible under the Act 71 construction grant. But obviously, if it's our own unrestricted money, then we can use it as we wish. So that's the analysis I'm going to be doing, is to have a look at the different scenarios. So first of all, figure out how much money we have left. Second of all, figure out what are the different potential uses of those monies. Do that analysis, come back to you guys either with a recommendation or a couple different options to choose from, and facilitate a discussion in executive session where we decide what we're going to do. And then from there, we will go forward. And the only other thing I want to tack onto this is that we need to do this sooner than later, because it's going to be more efficient to engage JSI to extend their existing work, because we have complete designs for everything except for Middlebury and Ripton. So if we're talking about doing this in Salisbury, Leicester, Virgins, Ferrisburgh, like we have the designs for those detailed designs. If we're talking about doing it in Middlebury or Ripton, then we do not. And so to the degree that we want to be building those areas, it'll be more efficient both from a time and cost perspective. Because again, before we can put this out to bid, we need to have the units, which means that we need to have enough work done from JSI that we know the units to be putting it out to bid. So the sooner that we can reach that determination, the sooner we can get the balls rolling to make sure that we're able to spend this money productively in time. So having said that, we're going to talk about the audit in a little bit because my plan is to work with Lynn and Darlene and Bonnie on the audit as a priority over doing this. But I mean, I'll be working on this some. It's not like I would be doing just one and not the other, but we need to be knocking that out.
Did you ever get the inventory from Dawn, or is that still hanging out there?
I haven't checked my mail today. I was mailing her as recently as Friday or over the weekend, letting her know. So she's aware. Yeah, she's aware. Lisa's aware. WCPT is aware that we need that year-end inventory from them, as well as the field visit to Leicester to be able to, because that's an input for our audit, of course. But there's a lot of other things we can do on the audit side. And the reason I want to knock the audit out quickly, and I know I'm jumping ahead on the agenda, is because we had very little asset capitalization, and because it's going to be good just to get it done and get it out there. And also, part of that process is work I'd have to do anyway in terms of making sure that I understand the current state of play of how much money we have left.
Yeah, I asked about the Dawn thing because I think you had informed Roger that you were having an audit meeting like tomorrow.
Mhm.
Yeah, and please get that to us by then. And we're meeting with Roger tomorrow morning, right? So I don't think you've gotten it yet. I didn't get copied, so I think it's still hanging out there.
No, we don't have it, and it's not. We don't need it for the meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow is a planning meeting internal. It's just that we need it in order to be able to finish our analysis to be able to pass it over to the auditor. So I don't want to be getting it in like March, like I think we did last year. So that's the main point. But yes, we can raise that tomorrow. Okay, so that's that. We do have a lot to cover in the next hour, so if anyone has any questions or concerns, you can raise them now. Otherwise, this is just teeing you up for what's going to happen and to let you know that I'm going to be getting that to you as soon as I can.
Si, are you on for the duration, or are you going to need to jump pretty soon?
I have to jump at 4:30, 4:29.
Okay. So if there's anything, Si, that you want to talk about before you depart, we should do that next.
Nothing specific from me.
Okay. All right. Okay, so moving on, the next item 7B is GoNetspeed Make Ready request. So I received an email over the holidays from GoNetspeed's outside plant coordinator. I'm probably getting his title wrong, but anyway, one of the guys at GoNetspeed, and it was essentially requesting. So under the regulations in the state of Vermont, as you guys are all aware, when the way that Make Ready works is you do your engineering and you figure out the Make Ready required by the pole owning utility, which they have to do, and by the third-party attachers. And the cost of any adjustments to the third-party attachers is borne by the entity which is newly attaching to the poles. So GoNetspeed has been doing this. They are getting ready to build out areas of Shoreham and Orwell that's where they don't have service, and probably some whiting as well. So basically all of the, which this is no surprise because they had opted into enhanced EACAM, enhanced ACAM. And so at some point they needed to build fiber to every address in these towns as part of that FCC commitment. So they're doing it sooner rather than later, which is what it is. So they're building, and under the regulation, when a make ready work order comes from Green Mountain Power, we have 60 days to do that ourselves if we want to, and then send GoNetspeed the bill, or at the end of 60 days, they can do it themselves. And so in practice, this is what happens generally in the industry is, people wait the 60 days and then they move the third-party attachers because no one wants to be hassled to go and move their plants because of someone else building. And then, of course, if there's any damage or anything caused by the moving, that is the responsibility of whoever's doing the moving to repair and remediate. So this is nothing unusual. GoNetspeed built fiber right around the time that we did a couple years ago, and we moved some of their plant and they moved some of our plant, and it happens all the time. It's nothing like that part of it is nothing unusual. So I received a mail from them. I was aware that they're doing this anyway because I was getting the make ready work orders from GMP that started to come in mid-December. So we received a request from GoNetspeed to waive the 60-day waiting period so that they could move our plants immediately if they had the license from Green Mountain Power. And I replied to them to say, well, this is not something that we don't have a policy on this, and I'm not really authorized to make this decision on my own, so I'm going to bring it to my executive committee. So that is where we are. I spoke with Steve about this a little bit. My My view is it would have been better to get this request a couple of years ago, so we could have made it bilateral. And I will probably still make that request that should we ever need to move their plants, we should just, have a standing waiver of the 60-day waiting period, because that way at least we get something out of it as well. But I can't really see a good reason to reject this request. I mean, like if we reject it, it buys us, another 30 to 60 days of being the only fiber provider in the area, and it buys us a whole lot of ill will. And if we do work with them, then we have a friendlier collaboration working relationship in the event that there is some sort of a problem. So I did use this opportunity to let them know that I wasn't going to be making a decision myself, and to ask to speak to the entity that they're using for contracting, just because it's good to see who their construction company is and potentially add them to our bidders list for BEAD, and really just have that direct relationship. And then I also asked for a certificate of insurance by the contractor, having us as a named insured, which is actually a requirement anyway under the 3700 rule. So I actually got that today, and I'm checking with our insurers to make sure, just to make sure that it properly covers us, because it doesn't have our official name. It has Maple Broadband, and broadband is 2 words. And I just want to make sure that whatever it is that we get would actually cover us in the event that it needs to be used. So that's where we are. So my recommendation, such as it is I think we should allow them, we should waive the 60-day waiting period for them for the reasons that I previously specified, but I will, of course, do as you guys instruct.
Yeah, if Magna were here, I think she'd probably tell us that we should wait for 60 days, because that's 60 days where we're the only provider, and we might pick up some more subscribers when we're the only one available. But it's not, it could be 1 or 2. So I guess I yield to your opinion on that one, Ellie.
Yeah, I mean, these areas we've had service for months now, and so
Yeah.
another 30 or 60 days to me seems a little bit petty. And we do need to be working nicely with these guys in the sandbox pretty much forever, because we're both competing in the same service territory. So I feel like we should grant their request.
I'm just curious about how competitive we are with them. I mean, are our prices about the same? Are they
We're
losing
not-
customers because they have crummy service? What customer service? What is the situation?
This situation, the take rate that we have varies dramatically by town, and there's the higher the income, or the higher the property values in the town. I don't know the incomes by town. That's not information that is available as far as I'm aware. But the higher property value towns, namely Cornwall, has a much higher take rate than the other 3, which is not a surprise. But in general, they are significantly cheaper than we are. I mean, they're like $20 to $30 cheaper for the same speed, which makes it, if you are not having enough discretionary income where $20 or $30 a month doesn't matter to you as much, it's very understandable why we would not be acquiring customers that have been GoNetspeed customers all along, or Otelco or Shoreham Telephone. The reason for this, one of the reasons for this is the enhanced ACAM, where they receive something, I don't know what the number is. I think it's maybe $50 or $60 a month subsidy from the federal government for every single address for a number of years. And so they have a cost advantage on the operating side that we can't compete with. At the same time, we've received a free money on the CapEx side. So I don't want to say it's like an unfair competition, but it is what it is. I mean, there's a dynamic there where, for whatever reason, they are able to offer much cheaper rates than we are.
Are people satisfied with the service and their customer service as well?
GoNetspeed hasn't told me that. I don't know if anyone who lives I don't know if, Sai, if you have any views. I mean, generally, my general impression is they're fine, The fiber service is fine.
And people are really happy that they're getting free installation, and they're not having difficulty from what I've gathered hither, thither, and yon. Who knows what happens down the road, but right now people are, if they're shopping for the bottom line, they're choosing Otelco or GoNetspeed.
Yep. What I am planning to do with our marketing firm, and this should be no surprise if anyone from GoNetspeed is listening to this call, is with the launch of the affordable long drop program, if that ever gets launched, which it will at some point before all my hairs are gray, is just to use that again to generate some urgency, like nothing to do with the Go NetSpeed build, but that money also has a clock associated with it. So we want to use that to build some urgency so that people who might want to subscribe to Maple Broadband but are turned off by the cost of having to put in their own conduit, at least we can get those. So we're just all the more reason to have there be some urgency around it. But other than that, general comment, competition is a good thing. So I think this is overall maybe not the best for our business case, but we'll be there in 10 or 20 years, and we're all going to have changing prices over time. So I'm not really too fussed. Zapata.
Yeah, I mean, just your last comments about urgency and timeframes, that for me just makes it even more important to be amiable players, where if we're willing to provide some flexibility so they can move on their construction schedule, that in return, when we might be up against the brick wall, that they would provide that same level of flexibility so we can meet our time deadlines too.
And we'd like that in writing too, right?
Yeah, it'll be. I'm not sure about I'm not sure exactly what level of writing is required. If we need to have a legal agreement, or if just an email back and forth is going to be good enough. I can speak to council on that, but yes, that's the idea, is that we have a reciprocal arrangement. We've already built most of what we build in those towns, but not all of it. So. Yeah.
I move we authorize Ellie to release Go NetSpeed to begin attachment work at their earliest convenience. Is there a second?
To approve their make ready request.
To waive the 60-day wait period before they move our plant.
We got a second now, so discussion. Okay, all in favor, raise your hand or say aye.
Okay, Shannon seems to be frozen.
Shannon, you're frozen.
Sorry. Teams is giving me problems today. I'm not sure why, but I am in the affirmative.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to 7C, H11 consumer protection. So I put this into the email that I sent out to all of you guys. There was a little bit of back and forth over the course of the last week. There was a period when it seemed as though the request of CUDs was whether or not we supported the draft bill that's been on the wall for a year plus that was introduced by Representative Sibilia. But the actual request is as per my email. So just to give you the background on this. So Representative Laura Sibilia she sits in the Vermont Community Broadband Board. She's also a state representative. She's the Fukuda rep on the broadband board and has been for many years. She is one of the original forces behind and authors of Act 71, which is the reason that we have the Act 71 construction grant money. And she is a huge fan of CUDs. She is also a huge fan of consumers and consumer protection. And so that's kind of where she's coming from. I mean, just to give you guys the background. So she introduced a bill last term, H11, which is a consumer protection bill. And in general, in Fukuda internal discussions, we supported the intent of the bill, but some of the actual wording and as with many things, when we see this in VCBB, that just the operational realities and the wording needed to be modified, in our view, to be a little bit better. And then there was a lot of testimony on this bill last year, and a lot of the testimony focused on non-duplication of existing consumer protection laws, as well as obviously not doing anything which is counter to because the federal government, the FCC, has the right to regulate, which preempts any state laws. And so just, again, making sure that whatever was done was not counter to existing FCC regulation. So having said that, Laura is trying this year to get the bill moving and passed. And by the bill, I don't mean the draft of what I linked to you. I mean a bill, which is broadly in support of consumer protection with those two ring fences that I mentioned earlier. And so the question, just from a policy perspective, is do we as a CUD Like, what is our position on consumer protection? I mean, again, like, we are a service provider. I think in general, we want to make sure that whatever obligations are on us from a state law and regulation perspective are not overly onerous, too difficult to comply with, unreasonable, unworkable, unimplementable. I mean, like all of that typical stuff. But it does also highlight the fact that as communications union districts, we have, in my view at least, we have a bit of a dual role. We have Maple Broadband, the ISP, and we have Addison County CUD, where there are consumers served by other parties. Go NetSpeed, where we don't have service, Fidium, where we don't have service, and WCVT, where they're our partner, but we don't actually control them. And so when it comes to consumer protection, consumer rights, the good of the consumer, is our primary interest as Maple Broadband the service provider, or is our primary and business, or is our primary interest Maple Broadband the representative of all consumers within our member towns? So that's kind of what I wanted to get your opinions on. I mean, in my view, it's not one or two, it's both. But in this case, again, personal opinion, the broader umbrella is the one that we should be going with. And whenever asked my personal opinion, that's what I always say. But if the district wants to take a different opinion, then that would be really good for me to know so that I can make sure that I'm more careful in my public statements and interactions.
I think the theory of that, Ellie, is right. It's the practicality of it and how it plays out in a legislative manner when you cannot be responsible for what NetSpeed does, what Fidium does, what WCVT does, because we can't, we ain't, we shouldn't. So it's, I mean, that is a fine line. I mean, we can sort of advocate on behalf of any consumer as a CUD, regardless of their provider, who they're consuming from specifically. But I think we just have to be a little bit careful at looking how the final wording lines up, and to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a position where we could be taking on consumer issues that are not ours, as it were.
Right. Well, and just to clarify, because this is obviously a little bit confusing, the bill never said anything about CUDs getting in the middle of this. It was essentially a bunch of thou shalt nots and then obligations on internet service providers. And so the question is, in general, do we have any issue with thou shalt nots or requirements of ISPs that relate to consumer protection, so long as we don't feel in our role as a service provider that they are overly onerous or difficult to implement?
Then I think my gut reaction is no. If there are thou shalt nots that are appropriate and manageable, then they are protecting consumers, then we should not be fighting that.
Yep.
I agree. In some cases, it levels the playing field that any and all internet providers are beholden to the same standards of consumer protection and service, which I think I guess it could go both ways. If we had players that were not providing appropriate services, then that could benefit us in the long run. But on the flip side, having a level playing field where everybody knows what is expected out of a provider is, I think, really important. It provides clarity.
Yep. Anyone else have anything else to say? I don't really feel like this is controversial. And as a matter of fact, I'll go a little bit further and say that I feel like taking any position other than the one that we've just talked about would be a little bit politically interesting, because then it makes it look like CUDs are interested in, I don't know, looking after their own business as a service provider in the way that, the bad old incumbents do, right? And so if we're meant to be the good guys and we're a public entity, we should act like the good guys. Okay, so I don't know that we necessarily need to vote or anything on that. I wanted to have the discussion here so that we were all on the same page, and that I knew that I had your blessing politically for my position on this. Okay, moving on, insurance. So we had a discussion over email just around that we may wish to have a look at our current coverages to make sure that they're sufficient. Hi, sweetie.
Hey, Mommy. Look, it just shows a hand.
Isn't that funny?
Yes, see, there's just a plain hand.
I know.
But
There's
it's
just
actually coming from me.
yes, it is.
It's funny, Mom. There's just a plain hand.
I know. Isn't technology wonderful?
It's funny.
Okay. All right, sweetheart. Thank you for saying hi.
You're
It's
welcome.
nice to see you, and I'll see you at dinner. Okay, sorry for that little interstitial advertisement for Microsoft's computer-generated background. Okay, so we had a conversation over email about whether or not the insurance coverages that we have around, for example, directors and officers, and I forget what else we're looking at, like liability, were actually sufficient. And I agree. We haven't looked at this in some years. I had a look at the property insurance in some detail a couple of years ago. That one, I don't remember the details of everything we talked about, but I think that one is kind of fine that we understand that. But I'm not sure that we ever really looked, or I can't recall in detail the discussion of like exactly what is and isn't covered. And from time to time, the insurance companies tried to sell us cyber insurance, which is like for protection of digital leaks or things like that. And I think someone else, maybe Jeff, had said, which is not wrong, that periodically it's good to go out to get bids from other providers. So I think just wanted to sort of wrap all that up and say that we might wish to have a little work package that I would appreciate some help from one or more people on the executive committee to, and maybe Lynn, but Lynn does a lot. It doesn't need to be the treasurer that runs these things. To help with this analysis because right now there's a lot that needs to happen between the audit and figuring out how to spend the rest of the ARPA funds. So a little bit later in the year when time permits, it would be, if you guys think it's of interest and if we can get a volunteer, it'd be great to have someone to work with me on that. And if no one volunteers, I may get to it, I may not, but this will help make sure that it happens if someone holds me accountable, because insurance, full disclosure, insurance is one of the most boring things to me in the entire world. So this is not going to come to the top of my to-do list. I've left to my own devices.
Are all of our insurance policies right now on a November to November? Or is that just the?
It's January to December. I think I'm trying to remember. I think I need to look at our workers' comp. That one may not, but everything.
That's November to November.
No, or maybe
because Lynn just did the audit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Workers'
Okay.
comp is November to whatever, November to December, whatever. It's off cycle.
But everything else is on a calendar year.
Those invoices just came in, although I didn't look at the date.
Yeah. And so the property one, I specifically changed so that it aligned with the calendar year because it made my budgeting difficult that it was off cycle. So we paid for like a 13 or 14 month periods or 15-month period last year. And so now, but that's something else we could do is just get them all onto a January start. Because the directors and officers, everything is through Telecom Insurance Group except for the directors and officers, which is done through the Richards Group. I mean, it's like, I forget who actually does the insurance, but they're the broker, Richards Group.
My sense is that nobody on the executive committee knows a lot about insurance. And I think the worry that we'd expressed before is, I think we'd love to do this, but it would be best if the initiative was being handled by someone who was familiar with it. So if it's true that the members of the executive committee don't have, some competence in that area, then it might be a good idea to ask the governing board when we meet tomorrow if we can, draft someone. Is there anyone on the governing board that has some familiarity with this, can help us with it? Because I think in a way it feels like it's going to be the blind leading the blind if we just do it without any clear understanding of the ins and outs of insurance.
Would we want to ask the finance committee members first?
Yeah, why not? I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we can, but Shannon?
If you don't find anybody, I will reluctantly wear that hat. Like 35 years ago, I was an insurance agent for a little bit, but more life, property, casualty, health, but that was a long time ago and things are different.
Mhm.
Okay. I think we should, thank you for that, Shannon. I think we should ask the governing board tomorrow, just because we may not hear back from the finance committee before then. And I rather suspect, given the composition of the finance committee, that unless, I don't think Magna has that in her background. I'd be shocked if she did. And I mean, unless Nick does, Jeff
don't
might,
know.
but Jeff is so busy. I don't think we're going to get the time from him. So I think we should bring it up to the governing board. I'll also mail Nick and Jeff, just the two of them, to see. But I wouldn't hold my breath. Okay. Okay, great. So we can move on with that. All right, so the next one is governing board quorum engagements, in-person meetings, and mission workshops. So as you guys know from coming to governing board, we struggled to get quorum last month. Happily, we did, thank goodness, because we had to pass our budget and everything. And the month before, we actually did not. And I don't know if it's the winter or whatnot, but or people losing interest, but we're not having great participation. So that's subject number one. I know that Steve reached out to a number of them. London Middlebury, completely aside from the quorum issue, London Middlebury had suggested a little while ago that it might be great to do a workshop with the governing board around things like vision and mission and so on. Because to some degree, you might think, well, what's what? But we haven't. If you look at our boilerplate mission, we haven't actually looked at it in a couple of years, and we may want to update it in light of the current realities and in light of things that we've learned since we became a service provider around things like digital equity and digital skills, and even to be able to better inform the conversation we just had. I mean, I'd love to know the opinions of more governing board members, and maybe we could use that as a way to build more engagement. And we may also want to consider having some in-person board meetings that are specifically designed as in-person with remote option, but just as a way for people to get to know each other better, feel more involved, have like a pizza or something like that. So just wanted to kind of throw that out there for discussion. I mean, this is more of a, I would love to have a vision mission workshop with the governing board just because it's not urgent, but I feel like it would be helpful from the marketing and positioning and strategy standpoints to revisit that because, I mean, it really has been since about 2020, 2021. It's been a long time. And if you look at our boilerplate right now, it feels to me a little bit dated and inaccurate. And I keep wanting to rewrite it, but it's not my place to rewrite it. And then just other things around how and when the board meets. I think it would probably be great to have this conversation with the full governing board, but obviously, as you know, participation being the problem, it makes sense to have the conversation with a more engaged group first, go to them with some sort of a proposal to get their feedback on. So that is the reason this is on the agenda for you guys to talk about.
I feel like with the governing board, we basically have a long agenda and it's all business items and it kind of runs from the next to the next to the next with a lot of information. And then depending on when board members have joined, they're piecing together the history. So I think it would be really beneficial to have sort of a comprehensive package of mission and history and where we're at and sort of the forward vision moving, going in that direction. The in-person hybrid, I think, is hit or miss, given the time, the time that folks are meeting or where we need to meet. But that could be great. So, I mean, I'm in favor of that. And then my question is there any reason, I know that we've sort of placed the responsibility upon each of the representatives, the town representatives, that if you can't make it, you reach out to your delegate. But is there any reason for why we shouldn't be just sending out the invitation to the delegates as well, so that we don't have that lack of gap in potential communication, and that whether or not they've been asked to attend, perhaps they would like to, even if it's only every other month or every 3 months, just to sort of stay current. So if they are tasked with joining, that they're not completely in the dark.
We do. So the email that I send, everyone's in BCC because we had some issues years ago with people emailing each other and like on irrelevant topics, and it turned into a bit of a mess. So that's the reason. That's the reason it's still on BCC. But everyone gets that.
Okay.
The delegates and their alternates. I think the problem, and some of the delegates do email like me or Steve when they can't make it, but it doesn't really help. They should actually be mailing their alternates to say, "Hey, I can't make it. Can you please make it?" Right? Because I mean, it's great to know as a heads up your apologies. That doesn't really help if we don't have quorum. And yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, so something that you mentioned and what I was intending to raise as my part of my chair report related to your comment that, and this was specifically like for Whiting as an example. Whiting basically has never had a delegate, and you'd reported that I believe NEKCV has, since there seems to be no prohibitions to that, there's a way that you could that Whiting, for example, the Whiting Select Board could say, well, we want Shannon to represent our town as well as Virginia's. And I don't know that I have it right, but I thought it seemed like a good thing to do. And if it makes sense and we don't think that there's any traps, which would be some concerns about, who are we offering it to? How broadly do we want to do this? We want to make sure that what we're doing is represents trying to be inclusive. Then I think it's a really good idea. I think what we need to figure out is, what's the scope? And it's sort of pressing from my perspective, because it would be another item that if we want to implement something like this, it's best to bring it up tomorrow with our governing board and tell them, here's what we plan on doing. What do you think? And seek their buy-in if we want to do something like this.
Yeah. So at the moment, the statute is silent. It says that every town may appoint a delegate and one or more alternates, but it doesn't specify anything about the delegates being a resident of that town. And so this is, in fact, how NEKCV is handling core. Because, in the Northeast Kingdom, you have some towns they have some member towns that are quite small. We have a problem in Whiting, multiply that by a lot. And actually, the statute requires that a quorum is of your members and not of the towns that have appointed delegates. So, in their case, it's actually quite critical that they do this. So they started doing this a year ago or something like that. So, and again, Steve, it's obviously not up to us to be appointing delegates, but what we could do is, again, raise it with the governing board and then make it solicit from people who show up regularly and are engaged, and maybe we could maybe ask them, are you willing to serve as a delegate from multiple towns? And then send that roster out to towns that don't appoint people or that struggle to appoint people and say, here's a bunch of people who are engaged and that are willing to do it. Maybe consider one of them, because you may under the statute.
And then in that case, say they wanted Shannon to represent them in Whiting, Shannon would have 2 votes.
Shannon would have 2 votes. Yep.
He would have 2 votes on the governing board, but not on the executive committee.
Correct.
Right.
When I was in my notion of this, to make it simpler, I was going to propose that it just be a member of the executive committee serve in that as a super delegate. That way, they're kind of pre-qualified. We know that the members of the executive committee are always consistently attend governing board meetings, so there's a little less risk there. So and it seemed to me that since we've already been vetted by our community, then that kind of might help a little bit. But again, I'm just trying to move this forward, so I'm okay with whatever you folks think. If you think it makes sense. And the other scope is it just going to be for Whiting? I think there's another town that we don't have a delegate on. Is it just limited to that? Do we want to do it like if there's a lot, I think there's other towns that don't have an alternate. And so what do we do about those? And to me, we need to not have this happen again when we had to really struggle about getting quorum for a governing board meetings. That's not good messaging. So yeah, thank you.
I know that we've been going through the select board, but is there any reason why Maple Broadband maybe should not reach out to the planning commission for these towns and just say, delegate hasn't been appointed. This is part of your town planning. Perhaps one of your board members might like to be a delegate to represent your town. Shannon?
The legislative body has to appoint one. Certainly you could reach out to a planning commission and say, hey, we need your help. And I think most planning commissions would at least consider that and look at that. But it would still have to go through either the select board or city council or whatever the legislative body is.
Yeah. I think
I'm just
it is-
wondering how active the select board is in actually reaching out to people who might or might not be interested.
Correct. Yeah.
You know, I was roped in because I was serving on the Conservation Commission and I have internet issues. So Allison was like, "Hey Zap, what do you think?" And that's how
Well,
I
we got
ended
them
up.
sorted out, didn't we? We got your internet
We
fixed.
absolutely got them sorted out. But that's how I got on, and I just don't know that at least with the planning commissions, you have, you know, Whiting has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people on their commission, and so you could have the approach could be if one of you would be willing to be a delegate, one of you would be willing to be an alternate. They know each other. And so that communication might be more seamless. And if you're interested in doing that, take it to your select board so you can be, you know, recognized. I mean, it might be just a good proactive way of actually tapping into somebody in town.
And even if they personally don't want to commit, they might know somebody who could.
Agreed. Nancy?
I'm wondering about, you know, our governing board meetings are pretty much, we are talking to them. We are talking, we are providing them with information. Once in a while, we've got to ask them to vote on something, but largely we're giving them updates. And I just wonder if there might be a way to, and maybe our marketing partner can help us with this. I wonder about whether people would be more engaged if we asked more of them in the meetings. If we asked them, you know, it might be something about their experience with internet or their experience with, if they've gotten service recently, you know, what we might ask of them that would help our marketing folks with their work of selling our services. This is off the top of my head, but I think that I think if we want people to be engaged in those meetings, we need to ask more of them than just listening to us.
I think that's a really fair point, and I think it's a tough balance to strike
For sure.
between asking too many decisions of people who don't have all of the context and don't have the time to come to executive committee to understand all of the context, but also ask so little of them. Because I can totally see how people aren't coming. It's been many months since we've had any sort of a vote other than on the agenda and the minutes, right? And so I could see why people might say, well, if all we're here is to listen for updates, like, why do we come? I mean, okay, because that's not entirely true. We did approve the budget, but
we want their help in communicating with their town. Maybe we want them to, maybe we have some pieces that we'd like them to place in their town's front porch forum. I mean, maybe we want their ideas about how our organization might increase our take rates in their town. I mean, there are a lot of things that people know about how their town works that are kind of specific to their town. So I mean, just in general, I think if we were asking more of them and trying to take advantage more of what their understanding of their own context, that would help people want to be there.
yeah, and I mean, this fits in with, we talked some time ago about potentially having a community engagement committee that's formed from the governing board. And I feel like we raised this in the governing board meeting, got a whole lot of silence, but that's sort of why I was thinking, like, if we can get people together and say, look, we're going to bring you together. It doesn't have to be on a Tuesday night. We could decide to have a governing board meeting on a Saturday afternoon or something like that. I mean, we could figure out a time that worked for people. And we have a special meeting and it lasts for a couple hours and we do a workshop on, like, we could have a presentation on where we've been. We could have facilitated workshop on where are we going. We could talk about community engagement and some of the challenges we're having with community. I mean, like, because like, yeah, just talk basically, but facilitate this. I mean, London Middlebury is more than willing to have a workshop that covers these two topics of like mission, vision, and then how do we engage better with the community. But we need to decide if that's something that we want to do. And then if we do, then to the governing board set a time for it.
I mean, we also may want to ask the governing board for some specific feedback about our governing board meetings. What's working in our meetings? What do you value the most about when you come? What seems to be not working? What would you want us to do more of? What would you want us to do less of? All of that sort of thing.
Yep.
As it stands, we have made no decisions on doing anything. So are we going to do any of this stuff, or I can do, to your comment, Nancy, I can ask the governing board tomorrow about, how do you feel about what we're doing here? What could we do better? All those kind of questions. Again, I think my worry is that one might question whether or not we're really we're properly representing our member towns when we really only have 11 members listening to our activities and participating in our work. And that's I think is not the message we want to be communicating to our communities. But we can kick it down the road, put it on the agenda, and talk about more things. I don't know if there anybody who wants to do anything beyond.
Well, I don't know that we'd be ready to do anything differently tomorrow night, but I don't know. I don't know.
Well, you could maybe talk a little bit about this subject tomorrow night and take the temperature on whether or not people would like to have a mission, vision, community engagement, like governance of governing board kind of in-person session for a longer period of time. And if you get silence, that's going to tell you one thing. And if you get a whole bunch of, yes, we really want to do that, that's going to tell you something else.
Good. How's that sound, everyone?
Well, and if you want, if you want to send me the towns that don't have delegates, and the information you'd want me to share about Maple Broadband, I could reach out to the planning commissions, whether it's the chair or the town, and just introduce myself as the delegate for Ripton, and suggest that it would be great to have their towns represented.
That would be great. It's Panton and Whiting. It's on the governing board agenda that was distributed, so you should have it.
Okay. Yep, then that's easy enough.
Yep. Okay. All right. I think that's enough for now. Do you guys want to continue? Are you good? Okay. All right. So moving on to Finance Committee and audit update. So we had a Finance Committee meeting at December 18th. So the draft minutes are up on the website. And what we talked about there was we had we were going to detail on the corrective action plans that were in the audits. So I don't really want to get into the weeds in this forum other than to say that we talked about it, and we're going to be taking the results of my prior to the meeting analysis and some of the feedback from the meeting into our planning discussion with Darlene. But the idea is so some of these are procedural changes that we've already made, and some of these are things that we need to start doing going forward, and some of it is just a looking at things with the idea of making sure that our trial balance when sent to the auditor for the 2025 audit is really 100% and reflects the learnings from the past couple of audits. So I think that's all I have to say about that at this point. And then, as previously mentioned, we have a kickoff meeting, which is me, Lynn, and Darlene tomorrow, to talk about some of these things and talk about the process. And Lynn, I didn't tell you because I didn't figure it was really that important, but Bonnie did reach out proactively and ask, like, hey, how are you guys going? And when do you want to get started? And I said, well, we have a kickoff meeting Tuesday. I can answer your question better then. So she's ready to go. So, again, I feel like for sure this is going to be a faster, easier audit than our last couple, just because we've done 2 of them. We know what we're doing. We have so much less asset capitalization, and really, just to repeat what I said, because I think it's really important, what we really want to do, at least what I really want to do, and I don't think Lynn's going to disagree with me at all, is to spend even more uptime than we have in previous years' audits, making sure that before we send anything to Bonnie, that Lynn and I are really, really happy and have zero questions or anything like that. Because now that we've been through it a couple times, we know some of the checking things that we're going to be doing. And so, yeah, just kind of even better preparation, continuous improvement. Anything you want to add, Lynn? Nope. Okay,
No.
there we go.
Yeah, no. Nope. Looking forward to our meeting tomorrow, and that's great that Bonnie reached out.
Mhm.
So
Great. Okay, my treasurer is happy. I'm happy. That is good. Okay, Vacuda update. So the exciting update from Vacuda, such as it is, well, a couple things. One is we have our annual day at the legislature on the 29th of January. So we go there every year to just, be seen. And we hang out in the cafeteria for a couple of hours with coffee to speak to legislators that may come along. And we arrange coffees with our legislative friends, let them know that we're going to be there. And then there's Vacuda testifies usually in the committees of jurisdiction, which is Senate Finance and House Energy and Digital Infrastructure. So that's happening. If anyone wants to show up in Montpelier that day or happens to be there, let me know. Otherwise, that's business as usual, but just always nice to let you guys know that's happening. So there is some preliminary work to get the visuals done for that. A mail came out for Andrew yesterday or this morning, seeing if there was any customer testimonials that we might want to insert. So I sent that on to London Middlebury. So that's that. The other thing is you may or may not recall, Vacuda received some grant funding a couple of years back for capacity building and shared services, and so that money was not ARPA, but it was a similar federal source funds, and that money also has to be spent by the end of this year. So there's a couple $100,000 left of that, and so we went through a process in December of soliciting ideas from the membership about what we might spend it on that would be of mutual value. So we had some ideas, some brainstorming, we fleshed out a little bit. We had a voting process and then a discussion process on the results of the votes. And there were 5 topics that floated to the top, which are now going to get fleshed out a little bit more and scoped and priced. So I'll see if I can remember them off the top of my head. Otherwise, I will go to my document and open them. One of them is looking at HR and the ability to collaborate together on HR things in order to be able to save money or potentially do group procurement. So that's one. Another one is consumer awareness, specifically around VoIP versus plain old telephone service and batteries and why that's important and considerations and things like you don't need to panic that your fiber VoIP doesn't work like the telephone line unless you don't have a cordless phone. And if you do, and this is why you're going to want a battery, and the battery needs to be not just for your internet, but also for your phone, things like that. So consumer awareness. Another one is actually shared marketing services. So obviously we outsource most of our marketing, but with my oversight, a number of other CDs have it in-house, but we want to have a look at who's all doing what, how, what works, what doesn't, just exploring how that might be done together or not. So again, a lot of these things are work that's being done to give us optionality, but obviously we're not going to have our hands forced into anything. And then the final 2, one is having a look at adding on a cellular product that could be bundled with home broadband and what that might look like, and specifically the commercial and technology mix. There's some nuance there, but I'll just leave it at that. That's, Comcast offers such a service, and it is a barrier to exit for some people on Comcast if they have their cell phone through Comcast. So that could be interesting if it works out, which it might or might not, open mind. And then the last one is financial. Basically, it's having an independent third party come in and assess the financial systems and put together a series of recommendations of where there might be things that are either that are not being done properly or that could be done a little bit better, which is, I think, great because it's something that would be lovely to do, but by ourselves it would be expensive to have that done for ourselves. But the idea is basically to just to make sure that, because again, as CUDs, we're all kind of startup entities, and we've had our school fees tripping over a couple of these things, but we don't know what else might be out there that we might trip over. And so yeah, the idea is to have a look and see, you know, is there any material non-compliance that may not have come out of an audit? Because there's things the auditors check for and there's things the auditors don't check for. So if there's some material non-compliance with uniform guidance as it relates to anything in the financial function, it would be good to know that proactively and fix it rather than have there be a discovery at some point down the road. So those are the 5. So just wanted to let you guys know those are happening, and as and when more details are available on what's happening there in order for us to be able to opt in or, yeah, have a look, I will let you guys know. Any questions at this point? Nope. Okay. That's pretty much it. And then we talked about the H11 earlier. So that's about obviously a key subject in the Legislative and Policy Committee. Okay, VCBB update. So as I mentioned earlier, not to bury the lead, if there's good news on BEAD, you guys will know without having to wait for a meeting. But so if you haven't heard anything, it's no news. So no news on BEAD. Steve?
There's a dashboard that I've been kind of keeping an eye on. They don't update it all that often. It's posted by the NTIA. As it stands right now, there are 14 remaining states / entities that are not approved. So almost everybody's been approved. Vermont's in there, like the Virgin Islands, they haven't been approved yet. Puerto Rico hasn't been approved, but the rest of them are states. So it's happening. It's narrowing down. We're just still on the not approved list.
Yep, I have no further comment. But yeah, there's not really anything going on that I would have to comment on anyway. So the other thing, which then relates to the affordability programs, is we are still waiting on our grant agreement for the Affordable Long Drop program. That's the bad news. The good news is we are much closer. I've been corresponding on a pretty regular basis with the VCB staff. There's a draft of the relevant sections, and we've been back and forth. And so we should have that grant agreement soon. I'm not going to give you a date, but we should have it soon. And I think that's all I have to say about VCBB. Okay, BEAD and detailed design. So while we know what's going on with BEAD, Steve and I have been, at least I've been enjoying all the meetings with JSI. I am so happy with them. They're great to work with. They're really, really good. Just the quality of people and the responsiveness and the insight and the foresight and all that stuff. So one of their guys is coming to town this week. Steve and I are going to have lunch with him, which will be great. But we are progressing well with the detailed design in anticipation of BEAD. And I'm not sure, is there any additional color you want to add to that, Steve?
This is probably more to you than it is to anybody else. So it looks like you were pretty happy with the high level design for Ripton. I think we're done with that one. I think that's 100% approved, the high level design. And then I think what you delivered to JSI on our last meeting regarding Middlebury seemed like it was mostly like spurs. It was pretty much the only thing that really needed attention. I think the only thing I think we might have failed to mention to them is we finally found a route to get to Weybridge. That's not going to be problematic for us. And so they'll have to fix that on the Middlebury. They need to show that as an actual route when they do their next release. So yeah, I think it all went well, and I'm with you. They're good to work with. They're very responsive.
Yep. Very happy. Okay, so that's that. Affordability programs. So yeah, so CVOEO is essentially in a holding pattern on verifications until such time as we can launch the Affordable Long Drop program. We do want to re-verify the 2 households that have been receiving the grandfathered ACP subsidy for all this time. So that's the first step. But I've got a little bit of work to do to make sure that I want to write them a letter that goes out from customer service so that they're aware of what's going on. So that little bit of admin has been secondary to trying to get the actual grant agreement done for Long Drop and a few other things. But so basically, I'm hoping that we will get through those quite shortly. And then the next thing is going to be to put out an RFP for the support services to, once we turn it up, people are going to start registering their interest and we're going to have to start liaising with them. So teeing that up, and then the 2025 construction updates. So we told you at the end of last year that GMP was very close to completing a line rebuild on 74 West by the ferry in Shoreham, which is going to give us another 3 miles of people who are actually unserved and underserved. And the good news is that is now done, and they're actually waiting for us to remove some of our strand that's up west of the new line that they put in order for them to be able to take out the old poles. So Syracuse is aware of all that, and they are working on it. And we had a call last week, Wednesday. We have a call this week, Wednesday. So they're going to get an aerial crew up here sooner than later to start work on that. And then a little bit of additional work they need to do in Virgins. And there's also, if you will recall, there's a railroad bore on Tupper's Crossing we need to do in Virgins in order to be able to connect the section where we have aerial fiber with the, back to the light at the hub. So we're just trying to coordinate all those things. So Steve, thank you so much, Steve. Steve found a PE firm that's able to be the on-site resource for that and got the contract pretty much all the way over the finish line over my vacation. So all I had to do was come back and sign it, and then just check a couple things and put everyone in touch with everyone. So the ball is now in Syracuse's court to schedule that when the weather permits, because they need the weather to be warm enough for their boring machine to be able to work. So that's what's going on there. But the Tupper's Crossing is important because we want to be able to finish that section, and we have some customers south of there that we want to connect. But the 3 miles by the ferry alone is 100% aerial, and that will definitely put us over the line of the mileage that we need to complete our construction grant. So when that'll all be done, because again, there's crews that need to come, and there's weather, and there's splicing and so on. So when that'll all be done, I can't promise, but I would be extremely surprised if it didn't happen this quarter. And so what we're also trying to work towards, or what I'm trying to work towards, is just getting the inspection done and getting all the grant deliverables into VCBB so that we can formally close out the construction grant obligations. And then that will be done, and we'll be able to just continue, as we were talking about earlier, with spending the remainder of the money in furtherance of universal service. Okay. Steve?
Are you pushing both railroad bores, or do we want? I assume we're going to try to get them all knocked out now, or is that your plan? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, when the bore crew comes, they're going to do both. Tupper's Crossing is the important one because that's the one that we're trying to push fiber through immediately.
Yeah, you might tell the group about the prime customer you're trying to take care of there.
There's the Virgins Grain Center that's being built. They've been liaising with us for many moons, really wanting to be a Maple Broadband customer, and I would love to have them as a customer. Someone that emails you like every month saying, we really want to be your customer, is the sort of customer that you want to have. So
yeah, that grain center is on the property at the corner of 22A and 7 in Ferrisburg. Yeah, Shannon, I'm sure, knows that well. It's under construction, but I think that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so that's that. And we can go to the parking lot quickly. I do have one quick update on the network management agreement, which is that Eileen has returned she had knee surgery, and there was the holidays, and I was on holidays, and I was sick, but she's returned, and she and I are connecting. So I think probably she and I will get ourselves to where we need to be and then reconnect with Steve and Roger. And then Lynn, to the degree that the revisions touch on finance. So just wanted to give an update on that. I know the draft personnel policy is in review, and actually the number 30, the corrective action plans and the audits, we have actually talked about in finance committee. We discussed that earlier.
I know we're running out of time. For the personnel policy, thank you, Zapata, for going through that so thoroughly. I've accepted most of the revisions, and right now I'm in conversations with Cy on some of the outstanding questions and things. So more to come.
Fantastic. Anything else that anyone wants to talk about on the Steve?
Real quick, I know this got clarified. I'm not sure I've got it right. This relates to the audit. We're not going to use a different auditing firm for this year,
Right.
but we're going to issue an RFP.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead, Lynn. You want to clarify? I guess my question is, when are we going to issue the RFP for the 2026 auditing firm?
In February, and I was able to track down. I have
Chris?
NEK shared
Yep.
their RFP, and Ellie, I want to look at that with you. I mean, some of it I can easily edit myself, but there's some other things in there that are more details that I'm not clear on. But their RFP is like 12 pages long. And I think the RFP that Maple Broadband sent back in 2021, maybe, was not as comprehensive. And so part of it is, how much do we need to include in our RFP?
Yeah, and without having looked at theirs, I mean, one thing is I think your focus, Lynn, should be on the meat of what should be in there, because we have like we've made significant revisions and enhancements to our RFP template since the original one. And
Good.
and also, and the other thing is that if you look at any KCV, they have multiple different kinds of federal grants, some of which are direct
Exactly.
federal grants. So
Yeah.
their needs are almost certainly far more sophisticated than what ours are. And also they were the merger of two separate districts. And so if you just focus on the meat of what you think should be in there, send it to me. I'll plop it into our templates. We have something that we can go from. I mean, perfection is the enemy of the good. Let's get it to 90% so we have something we can review.
Yeah. I mean, part of it
yeah.
is like all the grants. I mean, their grant section was huge. So
Yeah.
anyway, all to say, I have that document, and there's a lot of boilerplate in it as well, which I don't know if we need or not, but Ellie, we can talk about that.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have anything else? I know we are bumping up against time, but good for us to get all this done, and there's a lot to cover in 90 minutes.
Mhm.
Anyone have any other business?
What's our next meeting?
Our next meeting is 2 weeks from today, which is the 26th.
Great.
It's the second and fourth Mondays is our general, unless there's a reason to change. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys. I think if we are done, then we can move to adjourn, and I'll see most of you tomorrow night.
Guys.
Thank you. Thanks so
Thank you.
much.
Pleasure.